Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and we're back for another Sunday Sew Along. This is part 5 of the B6702 Sew Along. Technically last week we were on a different garment because I was showing how to do a tower placket, but we're back to the shirt dress today. All the steps here on out, doesn't matter what kind of placket you're using, they're all the same. But today we're going to be attaching our cuffs and then getting our side seams and stuff all sewn up, and getting our sleeves all finished. So that's what we will be doing today. I do a little bit of a burrito-ish method for my cuffs to make those look nice and neat. We'll be adding our buttons to the cuffs, which you can definitely do at this point, or you can wait and do that at the end when you're putting your buttons into the front of the shirt or dress. Either. Anyway, that's what we'll be doing today. And again, no matter if you're doing a tower placket or a continuous lap, it works the same way. All right. If you would like to help support the channel and support these tutorials and sew-alongs, if you found them very helpful, I do have a Ko-fi account. It's like a virtual tip jar. It is linked down below in the description box, and all proceeds go right back into the channel to help make more and better tutorials and sew-alongs, since it's kind of the meat and potatoes of the channel, kind of the passion in helping people figure techniques out and taking their sewing to the next level. So definitely have a look there if that's something that interests you. Also, any questions you have, leave them down below and I will answer those as quickly as possible. All right, that's all I've got for today. I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday and I will see you all next time. Bye. Okay, so today we've got a bit of a shorter one because we're just going to be attaching our cuffs to our sleeves. So this is piece 15, and this step is the same if you are doing a tower placket or a continuous lap placket. Obviously, I'm showing you on the shirt dress, which has the continuous lap, but it works the same for both. So this is step 42 through 46 on the pattern B6702. If you're following along with that, again, I don't do this. I don't do the steps the same, but those are the steps we're covering today. Okay, so this is piece 15 is our cuff. We have interfaced both sides, or both cuff pieces. Now, this is one big rectangle, but basically this is going to be folded in on itself when all is said and done. So what we want to do first, you also should have your bodice and or shirt, which your side seams should have been all sewn up and ready to go. Okay, so what we want to do first, just to give us a little bit of a memory crease, is I'm going to go and fold these in half, wrong sides together. That way when we get everything all sewn up, it's really easy to see where the actual midpoint is in this cuff. It'll just make things a little bit easier. So I'm just going to go to the ironing board and press both of these pieces wrong sides together. And then I'll be right back. Okay, so once we have our pieces pressed, it just gives us a nice, sometimes it'll stick. Your interfacing want to stick. Just gives us a nice crease so that when everything is all nice and sewn, it'll go back the way it's supposed to really easily. And then once you sew one side, then things aren't like right, then pressing things in half gets more complicated. So it's a good step to do first off. Okay, I like to sew okay, so this is just like I did with my continuous lap placket, if you were following along with that. Again, this is the same. We're going to attach this the same way if you are doing the tower placket as well. So you're going to open up our sleeve, and we have our sleeve right side out, but we're actually going to sew the cuff piece to the wrong side of the sleeve first. There is actually a notch on this pattern that matches up with, I don't know that it's, you can use it. There it is. If that helps you, it doesn't really matter which one. But basically, you're going to have 5/8 of an inch overlap on either side of your sleeve. I do pin this only because when you're sewing in the circle kind of like this, it's easy to get off. So you just want a nice 5/8 overlap. You should have your pleat all sewn in to your sleeve as well. So again, that cuff piece, I've got right side of the cuff sewn to the wrong side of the sleeve. That should all fit in there nice and neat, and it does. Okay, so first I'm going to sew with the sleeve against the feed dogs because it is the less stable side because it does not have any interfacing. And we're going to sew it at 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters. And we're just sewing the sleeve to the cuff. And again, right side of the cuff to the wrong side of the sleeve. And if you basted your placket and your pleat, that should go together really easily. Okay, so here we have it. I'm going to move this cuff piece out of the way because it's going to get confusing. So this is the right side of my sleeve. And you'll see that this kind of pops up, and eventually that's going to get sewn down like that when all is said and done. It's also really easy for your sleeve to get all twisted. Okay, so now what we want to do, you can go over to your ironing board first and press this seam allowance up towards the cuff. I'm going to go do that real quick. Be careful not to press out your crease, though, that you have at the center of your cuff. So I'm going to go do that really quickly, and then I will be right back. Okay. It's another thing I love about shirt making. A lot of times you're using lighter weight, like shirting weight cottons and that sort of thing. And they just press so beautifully. Okay. Now, we are going to do a burrito method of sorts to attach this cuff. So as you can see, I'm going to go really slowly here. So here's the right side of our shirt, and we've got this cuff coming up. Obviously, you can see that crease that we had pressed. What I'm going to do, here's the inside. I'm going to fold these over right sides together on top of each other. So you can see, obviously, we want to sew, the end of this right sides together. But here's where the tricky part comes. We want to sew this seam about 1 inch in right sides together. So in order to do that, all I've done so far is just fold the cuff right side together. Now, I'm going to fold this seam allowance that we just pressed up, but I'm going to fold it down. And in order to fold that down, I'm going to have to tuck this sleeve placket up into that cuff. Now we can only go about 1 inch in there, obviously, because eventually you get to a stopping point there. So what I like to do is that you can then pin it, and I will show you up close kind of what this looks like. And I'm basically folding that back on itself on that line I already pressed. So that sometimes doesn't want to go real well. So as you can see, I've just taken and folded this seam allowance down and just tucked that up into that cuff. So everything is nice and kind of neat, and it doesn't want to go that way, so you kind of have to force it. But now I can see where I've already sewn, where I sewed the cuff to the shirt. I'm going to go about, start about here, 1.5 inches or whatever, inch and a half. You don't need to go too far. It's just enough to make everything want to tuck in nicely. But I'm going to sew exactly on that same line. And then when I get to you'll feel yourself come right off the edge of that placket, and then I'm gonna sew up. So I'm just gonna sew, pivot, and sew up the extra, and then backstitch here and backstitch right here. So you're sewing kind of an L. So the trick here is to sew right on your previous line of stitching. Here, I'll put you in my lap so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so here's my previous stitch line right here. I've got everything kind of folded up, and I can feel it very weirdly right through there. You want to make sure you don't pinch any of this into your stitching line, but we're going to check that before we trim anything. So I'm just going to sew right on that previous stitch line. And you can feel right when you go off that placket, which it's right there, which should be 5/8 of an inch. Look at that. And then like so. Okay, so it's like an L. Now we're gonna flip things right side out really quickly, just to make sure we didn't catch anything erroneously. And that all looks good. Look how lovely that looks. So see, this helps, it just makes a really clean edge right here, and then it helps kind of make this want to fold under for the rest of the cuff. So once we know that that side looks good, we're gonna fold it back out, and I'm gonna do the other side zoomed in like this, so maybe that'll be easier to see. So once that is all, we know that we haven't pinched anything crazy. I'm gonna go and cut my corners. I'm gonna trim that down a little too. So I just trimmed off my corners. So then everything should turn nice and neat. Now I will go with a, I have an old knitting needle, like a double pointed knitting needle, that I'll go and very gently ease that out just to make sure that that comes out nice and crisp. But there is one side of the cuff. Doesn't that look lovely? We still need to sew it down on the right side. Okay, so now we're gonna go to the other side. And again, because of the nature of the sleeve, it's very easy to get things all twisted. Okay, so now here is the inside of my sleeve, so the wrong side of my sleeve, and there's my cuff piece where we've sewn it already. So here we go. We've got right side of the sleeve. So now we're gonna fold this in on itself, right there at that crease. And if you want, you could even go ahead and just pin there at the top. Okay, so it looks like this right now, but we want this to be right sides together. So in order to do that, we have to take this piece and just fold it up. Just for a little ways. That should all, your raw edges should match up. Just for a little ways. Because we just kind of go in there and make sure that's all tucked up nice and neat. It can be a little bit fiddly. And again, you don't have to go that far. Okay, now this time I'm going to start at the top because it's the other side of the sleeve. I'm going to start 5/8 of an inch. And again, I can feel right where that placket is. And I'm just going to sew right along that previous stitch line. Just for a little bit, and then we'll flip it right side out to make sure we didn't catch anything weird. And that all looks, oh sorry, in frame, that all looks really good. So we can go back inside. I always check that because you don't want to clip your seam allowances and find that you've got something caught up in there, and then because that, I mean, that does happen every now and again. So I'm going to trim that, and then you've got like no seam allowances to work with. It's not how you want to do it. Okay, so once we've trimmed that, then when we pull everything right side out, I will go back up and kind of poke that corner out. But there we have it. Okay, so now all we need to do, because this will, like I said, because we pressed that memory crease in there, this will fold all nice and neat right there on that that fold line. So now you want to go to the ironing board and just, you know, take it and fold that seam allowance up. You know, if it's not 5/8 of a seam, you know, if it's a little less or a little bit more than 5/8, that's okay. You just want to make sure that you're covering that stitching line. And you'll have to do a little section by little section because it's not going to lie flat because it is, sorry, didn't mean to hit that. So just go and, you know, put a little pin along that and give that a good press. And I use glass head pins so they don't melt anything. So I'm going to do that real quick and then I'll come right back. Okay, so I've given everything a nice press and I've put, you can see my pins, I have them in perpendicular there. So now we are going to, again, top stitch. So my sleeve is right side out at the moment, but I am going to actually turn it inside out. Maybe. If I can get inside my shirt. There we go. Carefully so as not to poke myself. All right. So I want to sew with this up. So basically what I'm going to do is sew close to the fold, but I'm going to sew all the way around the cuff. So I like to start where it attaches just to make sure we get that down nice and neat. And I do like to sew, I don't know, maybe 1/16 of an inch away from the fold line, 1/8. I have the pins in there because I gave everything a nice press just to make sure that it was lying correctly. Because again, this can be just a little bit tricky because you are somewhat sewing into a circle, even though you've got the vent that keeps things, you know, helps definitely for things to lie flat. More. All right. And there we've got a cuff. Doesn't that look nice? Okay, so I'm going to go do this on the other side, and then we're going to talk about buttons and buttonholes, and then we'll be done for today. Once both my cuffs are finished, I obviously have my sleeve right side out now. Now we're going to mark our buttonholes. We're going to go ahead. You can wait and do this at the very end when you do the buttonholes down the front if you want. But while we're doing cuffs, I'm just going to go ahead and do this and show you how to do it. Okay, so we've got our placket up here. This will be the same for the tower placket. You'll be able to tell which side folds over which. So basically, the front folds over the back. So you want this pointing towards the back of your sleeve, which is right there. So what I've done, so you want your buttonhole on the overlap. So our button will go here and our buttonhole will go here. Now you can definitely follow the pattern and match to make sure that, you know, where they put the buttonhole. I just did 3/8 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch. I just measured and did a crosshatch there. So I'm going to start my buttonhole right here and go obviously into the sleeve. You've seen me cut open my buttonholes 100 times. So I'm just going to really quickly put a buttonhole in, and then I'm going to show you how I mark for my button, and then we'll get that sewn on, and then we'll be done for today. All right, so I've got my buttonholes. So I started them, you know, 3/8 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, and sewed those. I'll show you if you guys are, you know, wanting to see more, you know, how the machine, I mean, I have an automatic buttonholer on my machine, which most, not all, but a lot of machines these days do have. But I can show more of that when I do the buttonholes on the front of the dress, the actual button band. But anyway, we have it. I've already cut it open. I put fray check along the lines, both the front and the back. Iron it really well. It helps make it a little bit softer. That way it keeps everything nice and neat. But again, I can show you more of that when I do the button band. Okay, so we've got the buttonhole on the overlap of the cuff. Now, when you have your cuff buttoned, if you think about it, when a button is moving along this buttonhole this way, it typically sits on the far side because that's where things are pulling. So you want to put your button kind of on this side, not completely over to the side, but mostly on this side of the buttonhole to keep everything nice and tight so that it doesn't, you know, get too loose. You know, if you put your button over here on this side, it will move into place over there. So we want our button to kind of be on this side of the buttonhole. Now, my favorite way to do buttons is to actually put things wrong sides together. I find this much easier and much better way to line things up. We want to line up all of our edges here. And even though this is the side of the buttonhole we want to line up because of the way everything's mirrored, we want to stick a pin in on the far side. Not all the way to the edge, but, you know, close. Oops. You want to go straight down. And then it will come out the other side. And then from there, you can either mark it with like a, I don't have a friction pin here, or sometimes I'll just take another pin and I'll just do a little bite so I know that right there is where I want my button. And that's how I mark where I put my buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and I use my sewing machine as well. And again, I can show you that more when I actually do the button bands, but I'm going to go ahead and sew my buttons on, and then I will come back and show you what we're ending with today. Okay, so I've got my buttons sewn on, my buttonholes. So now we can button those cuffs. And there you have it. We've got a beautiful shirt cuff with a button, our beautiful continuous lap placket that's just kind of hidden in there. Again, this is a little bit daintier than a tower placket. Obviously, we're going to do the tower placket next week. Or, sorry, I'm filming this out of order. You've already done the tower placket. This works the same for the tower placket. Same cuff. And there you have it. All done. Okay, so next week we are going to attach our bodice to our skirt if you are making a shirt dress. If not, you won't do that. And then we are going to do our button bands and our collar and collar stand. So next week will be just a little bit longer. I will see you guys then.